Hey there, my name is Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. So it seems that ML tools and AI tools are improving on an almost weekly basis. Now because of that, now we as a society actually face several challenges. And the technical challenges, not the economic challenges or the philosophical challenges, but technical challenges to do with how these models are trained, how they're deployed, how they are policed. Now as a result, there's definitely going to need to be some legislation. There's going to be some need for international cooperation on a lot of these topics. So if you want to find out more, please let me explain. Okay, so let's jump straight in. So there are various challenges that face society as a whole. Now I've listed 7 here. One that I'm not going to go into is the economic challenges, so for example jobs and so on, because that doesn't actually matter about how you design the AI. If the AI can do what it needs to do, then that's a knock-on effect. These are the things we've got to talk about in actually how you design, implement, deploy and use these AIs, machine learning systems. So that's what we're going to look at. So what's actually happening is that in Bletchley Park, that's of course the famous place in the UK where the code breaking was done during the World War II, famous also for Alan Turing. 1st, 2nd of November, so about a month from now, there's going to be an AI safety summit. So it's going to host an AI safety summit, the UK to host the world's first summit on artificial intelligence safety in November. Talks explore and build consensus on rapid international action to advance safety at the front line of AI technology. Bletchley Park, one of the birthplaces of computer science, is to host the summit. So some of the things they've listed for the agenda, number 1 on there is the existential threat. Will these computer programs, will they eventually kill off us humans from the planet? Now, if some experts are right, AI possesses a major threat to human life, then if that's true, then regulation must be provided for national security and for planet-wide security. Most threat models, this is me talking now, are based on the AI gaining some form of self-awareness and sentience so that it can start programming itself, it can create better models of itself, it can do that very quickly, and you get this kind of singularity where very quickly it kind of becomes super intelligent, and then it can just basically hack into any systems it like. And if it decides that it thinks that humans are a threat to it, then it will just kind of launch nuclear weapons, you know, the kind of stuff that we've seen in films and so on. So the first point is it's based on the idea that these AIs gain some kind of self-awareness. Now if they don't gain self-awareness, we'll talk about more of this in a second, then this existential threat thing can't happen. Now, defining intelligence can be tricky. So this is the first thing. We're using the words artificial intelligence, and that in itself can be tricky. But key attributes include logic, reasoning, conceptualization, self-awareness, learning, emotional knowledge, emotional intelligence, planning, creativity, abstract thinking, and problem solving. Artificial intelligence is a machine which possesses one or more of those characteristics. So this is where the problem is, because when you talk about, for example, humans, we can say, well, we have all of those characteristics. When you talk about artificial intelligence, if it has just one of those, you say, oh, well, there we go. We've created an AI. So human level intelligence is also not the only type of intelligence we see around us. Animals have varying levels of intelligence. You know, I can call my dog, it understands a few words, it can perform tasks, you know, sheepdogs and so on, so they can learn. That's clearly they've got something, they've even got some kind of emotional empathy as well. So it's clear that we need to understand what intelligence really means and what level we're talking about. Does a sheepdog level intelligence pose an existential threat to humankind? No, of course not. So this is what we need to look at. So there is no universally agreed definition of AI. In fact, AI has become a buzzword, and this is one of my pet peeves. We're not actually talking about AI, we're talking about machine learning, which is ML. But I've finally given up. I've been talking about the fact that it's machine learning and not AI for, you know, many years now, but I've given up. We just have to accept that that's the term that everyone's going to use. Like it or lump it, it's really, that's what we're going to use. But anyway, so AI is often broadly categorized into 2 types. I do have other videos about this subject here on this channel and on the Android Authority channel. So you've got narrow AI or weak AI, which is something that's good at a particular task. So, you know, if you've got an AI that is good object, picture recognition, that's a cat, that's a hot dog, then it can do that, and it's narrow, it's weak, it can do one thing, but it's good at that one thing. Now, artificial general intelligence, now this is the word that is now being used more, because before we talked about ML and AI, now we have to talk about AI and AGI. So that's strong AI, which is a hypothetical type of system capable of attempting any problem that a human can. So this is the idea of an android, or a robot that can or a brain, a mind that can do anything that we can do, because it's now an artificial general, not a specific intelligence for a specific thing, not just recognizing cats and dogs, but it can do problem solving and planning and conceptualization and all this stuff. Now, I would contend that without self-awareness or sentience, and maybe free will as well, then an AGI is basically just a broad, weak AI. So what do I mean? If you can take an AI system that can do object recognition, that can do, voice to text and text to voice, and it can do computer vision stuff, and it can control servos on a robot. You can add in all these things and build them like bricks, like any computer program nowadays, build them up as modules in a system. So in the end, you get a very sophisticated weak AI by stringing together lots and lots of other weak AIs that are all good at one thing, and they interact with each other. And that's not what I would call an artificial general intelligence. That's basically just a very large, weak AI model. That's my contention. You may disagree with me, but there we go. So if we look at the things that are quite popular at the moment, that's ChatGPT, generative AI. You've also got the image generation stuff, music generation, text generation, all that. Does it fulfill these criteria? So you've got logic, reasoning, conceptualization, self-awareness, learning, emotional knowledge, planning, creativity, abstract thinking, problem solving. Well, actually, if you go through that list, in fact, the only thing that generative AI actually has is learning. So it's built up a machine learning system that has been able to learn about text, about images, about music, about whatever, and then it's using that model, you can then generate more examples of the things that it's learned, which is what a GPT is. So I don't think we're at a point, anywhere near a point, where any of those other things exist in the generative AI things that we have today. So that actually also raises an interesting question: is generative AI, as it stands at the moment, the techniques we use at the moment, is it just a stepping stone? I think it is, yes. I don't think this is the solution that we're going to be going forward with in a few years from now. I think this is just a stepping stone. Okay, so that was the idea of whether we're going to get nuked by our own kind of cleverness. So the second thing that the governments and the implementers of these things, we're already talking about this, is bias inside of machine learning models. So an AI can introduce new or perpetuate existing biases in society. That's a statement actually from the agenda of that Bletchley House meeting, and that's interesting because it's existing biases in society. So this raises a couple of interesting questions. And the first one, who decides what is a bias? Because for it to be a bias, you have to say, well, that's wrong, because actually what we should be thinking, what we should be perpetuating, what we should be considering is this. So you're actually making a societal judgment. Now, I'm not going to get into this. I mean, this just history is full of biases that existed that don't exist today, but there are new biases that exist today that didn't exist then. Sometimes it's for the good. Sometimes what is actually bad is now called good, and what is called good is called bad. So biases on a society basis is an interesting subject and a complicated subject. The question is, who decides? Who decides what is a bias? Now, machine learning doesn't include any ethics. We've already looked at these things. There is no conceptualization. There is no emotional intelligence. There is no value placed on a group, or on a value on an object, or a value on an idea, or on a truth. It doesn't exist in those things. It doesn't have a conscience. So the machine learning algorithm is just going to learn what you put in. So learning is based on data, and the output reflects the input. Now, when I was working as a software engineer, my team leader, way back when I was a much younger man, used to say this idea, and it's often said in computer science: you put rubbish into an algorithm, you're going to get rubbish out of an algorithm. And a lot of problems with algorithms is trying to actually work out what you do when there's rubbish input, so the output is not so rubbish. That's part of what software engineering is about. So of course, if you train on a certain set of data, the results that the machine learning algorithm give you are going to be based on that training. So if the data is biased, then the output will be wrong. And bias is often magnified in ML because the bias becomes part of the rule set. But bias can also occur when there are things missing. So if the dataset doesn't include information about a particular set of things, whether that's people or groups or races or ideas or ideologies or whatever, then the ML model won't be balanced because it doesn't even know about those other things. But there's a really important thing that we have to grasp here, and this goes back to this idea of society and who judges what is right. If you have a large country, and I'm not going to name any particular country, I did my original slide here, I actually named out some actual countries with actual statistics, but I thought let's just take the idea, if you have a country with a large population that holds views, and there are lots of large countries in this world, America, India, China, they have huge populations, they have huge influence in the world. If they hold certain views, then those views will be expressed online, in forum postings, in news stories, and social media. Now, we're not going to talk about, let's say, communism and the control over the media, but let's just assume that the people who hold these views can express them online. And therefore, you train a model with all the forum posts and the news stories and the Twitter feeds and all the other stuff, books that have been written, and you train your AI model, then those views will be built into the AI. That's just a normal thing. That's how the training works. Okay, and so it's pointless then for a different group who don't share those views to complain that the AI model is being biased, because actually all it's doing is just reflecting the training data, and in this case it's reflecting the current society. So that's a really interesting point. Again, who decides what is bias and who decides that something shouldn't say that, or the AI model shouldn't predict that, or the AI model shouldn't, have that idea, because actually that's what the training data gave it. Now, another problem, of course, is privacy, and this is related to copyright, but we'll talk about both of those. Sensitive information about individual businesses could be used to train AI models. Different to copyright, but based on the similar problem, i.e. using data that shouldn't be used to train an AI model. Should my health records, my tax records, my shopping history, and so on be used to train an AI model? Now, I'm pretty sure at the moment that there are things that we could consider as private things that are already entering into training models, because these models are being trained by large groups that have access to my shopping records, for example. So if I use a big online shopping service, and then they start to train the AI using that data, then my privacy is at risk here. And this is a big issue that they're going to have to be some laws and some regulations about this. And then also includes other things like facial recognition. People checking, there was that app, wasn't there, a few months ago, a while back, that you used to give it your face and then it would, generate other things. Of course, your face is then connected to an account because you've logged in with Google, with Android or whatever, and you're basically saying, hey, here's my face. And so please tie up this picture of my face with these records that you've got. And so, when they're now doing facial recognition, in a society-based level, and they can work out not just whether that's a person they've trained it to say this is a criminal, it can just say there's Gary walking down the road because it's got my face because I freely uploaded it on some other app or whatever. These are all huge problems that we really have to find out whether there's going to be any consensus about how we regulate about this. Now, another area that is a problem, of course, is misrepresentation. This comes in two forms. Language models like ChatGPT may produce material that misrepresents someone's behavior, personal views, and character. So, of course, you could, it would be possible. I tried this. It actually did quite a good job. But you could say, would Charlie Chaplin enjoy the comedy inside the latest Marvel movie or something like that? And ChatGPT is clever enough to say, well, we don't know what Charlie Chaplin would think about this. But, it'd be very easy for it to start quoting, for it to start producing content, because of the way ChatGPT works. It doesn't have a conscience, doesn't have a moral compass, doesn't have anything like that. Just it thinks it's the right thing to say based on the training data. It can start to misrepresent my views. Do this in the style of somebody or other, and that can be quite complicated. And also humans can use AI tools, and this is more of a real problem because this doesn't have an evil intent. This doesn't have a plan, whereas humans do, and humans can have evil intents to produce material that is false. So we can produce stories that are just blatantly not true, and they can be demonstrated they're not true, and then these get perpetuated by social media, news media, and so on. And also, of course, we can have deep fakes. So there are going to be some crises for sure. You can guarantee, so there are going to be some crises where people think that a certain person, and of course, if it's a famous person or a political person or a person with power or authority, that they've said or done a certain thing, and then actually they haven't said or done a certain thing because it was actually just a fake thing that was produced. So again, deep fakes, personal opinion here, deep fake should absolutely be illegal. Of course, just like many things like that, of course, it doesn't stop rogue governments or rogue organizations using them. And then it's how we spot them, how we work out, how we verify them. That in itself is a whole problem. And then there is the issue of transparency. There is a whole bunch of problems here because these models are so complicated with billions of parameters in them that we don't even know what they're doing. So AI models often struggle to explain why they produce a particular result or where the information comes from. And this is first of all due to the current nature of generative machine learning algorithms, GPTs, because it doesn't reason, doesn't have logic, doesn't think about why, doesn't conceptualize. It just says, well, if this is my input, then this is going to be my output based on the way the model has been trained. And unpredictability of AI, also known as unknowability, is defined as our inability to precisely and consistently predict what specific actions an intelligent system will take to achieve its objectives, even if we know the terminal goals of the system. It is related to, but not the same as, unexplainability and incomprehensibility of AI. So incomprehensibility and unpredictability are huge problems with AI. It becomes a black box. It's got billions and billions of parameters in it, and you think you've trained it for one thing, and there's some really good research on this stuff and some really good videos about this stuff. You think you've trained it on one thing, and in fact you haven't. So, a classic example is you train a machine learning system to play a particular arcade game. The exit for the level was a yellow box down the bottom left-hand corner. The machine learns to play the game and it manages to exit out through the yellow box. But actually, if you then move the yellow box to a different place, it still goes to the bottom left-hand corner because it wasn't training to go to the exit to the little yellow box. It was training to go to the left-hand corner. So you thought you were training with one thing and then it trained it something else. Now the bigger these models get, this becomes a huge problem. We don't know what it's going to do. We can't understand what it's going to do. So we get unpredictability and unexplainability, huge problems. And if we're putting our lives in, self-driving cars, in self-flying aeroplanes, in cranes that build buildings on their own, robots that do things on their own, if we are putting our trust in these things that can cause harm by accident, or then we need to know what these systems are doing. And this may be a technical problem that can never be solved. This may be unsolvable, and so it may just become a risk that we have to assume. But do we want to assume that risk? These are the questions. And as I said, we mentioned privacy. Copyright is very similar. Generative models, whether they be text, images, audio, or video, typically use existing content, which must be protected so as not to undermine the creative industry. And this is already becoming a huge problem. We've seen this. It's going to become more of a problem until this gets sorted. But, you keep training these models, whether they're for video or for text or whatever, on existing stuff. The existing stuff was created by us humans. And then we say, well, hold on, why does that picture, why does that writing sound very much like my writing or look very much like my art that I create? And these are huge problems. And also, of course, we've got the problem of dilution, because we still need humans to create these things to train the models. And if we stop creating things because we're just relying on machine learning generated content, whether that's text or images or whatever, then there's going to be a dilution problem, because there's never going to be anything new to train the model, and it actually just becomes a feedback system, and that ends up in some big problems. Now, this is a minefield, and really it will make or break generative AI on a per region basis, because of course you may expect that China might have one set of rules, America might have another set of rules, India might have another set of rules, the European Union might have another set of rules. And we've already seen that when things like BARD have been announced, they didn't originally come out in certain regions because of regulation exists in those regions that they wanted to be aware of. So this is a minefield, and I'm not a lawyer, but I can see it, the mess that's coming. And then the final one is liability. AI tools, if AI tools are used to harm, policy must be established whether the developers or the providers or the user is liable. Another minefield, who is to blame? Is it a consumer device? Is it the consumer that's to blame? Is it the maker that's to blame? Is it the programmer that's to blame? Is it the data set that they probably bought from somewhere else to do their training? Is that to blame? Can an AI system commit a crime? Now these are going to happen. There's going to be cases where something happens and some harm is done, whether that's financial harm or bodily harm or reputational harm, whatever it is, there's going to be some harm done, and it's going to be lots of cases, and there's going to be law laid down to work out who is to blame. Is it the person that used it, or the person that provided it, or the person that provided it with the data that they provided? So, it's going to be a very complicated system. So, okay, there it is. That's my 7 looks at the different challenges that face AI in the next few years. My name's Gary Sims. This is Gary Explains. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some food for thought. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you like these kind of videos, then why not stick around by subscribing to the channel? You can follow me, of course, on all the trendy and not so trendy social media platforms. Here are all the handles that are on the screen. Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.
How about a nice game of chess?